Folks, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the economic dumpster fire that is the U.S. Canada trade spat of 2025. If you thought tariffs were just boring numbers on a spreadsheet, think again. This is a masterclass in government mismanagement, economic sabotage, and the kind of political theater that would make even Shakespeare blush. I'm your host, the boss of economics, here to break down the madness, expose the hypocrisy, and show you how this clown show is tanking economies on both sides of the border. Let's get to work. Picture this. It's May 6, 2025, and Donald Trump is back in the Oval Office, grinning like a Cheshire cat as he meets Canadian Prime Minister Carney. Trump's got a new toy, tariffs, and he's swinging it around like a kid with a baseball bat in a china shop. His latest proclamation? No more back-and-forth negotiations. Instead, he's slapping down very fair numbers, his words, not mine, and telling countries like Canada to take it or leave it. Meanwhile, Carney, fresh off a Liberal Party victory fueled by anti-Trump sentiment, is trying to keep his cool while Trump muses, again, about making Canada the 51st state. Now, folks, if this sounds like a script for a bad reality TV show, that's because it is. But the consequences? Oh, they're real. Real jobs lost, real businesses crushed, and real economic growth flushed down the toilet. Let's unpack this economic horror story from the ground up, shall we? First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, tariffs. Trump slapping 10% to 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, claiming it's all about curbing the fentanyl trade and protecting American workers. Sounds noble, right? Wrong. This is economic vandalism, plain and simple, and the data proves it. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, U.S. Canada trade in goods and services hit $916 billion in 2024. That's nearly $1 trillion of economic activity, folks, with the U.S. running a $36 billion trade deficit, largely due to oil and gas imports. Canada is America's second-largest trading partner, accounting for 15% of U.S. exports and 14% of imports in 2024, per the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Now, here's the kicker, when you slap tariffs on your second-largest trading partner, you're not just punishing them, you're punishing yourself. Take the auto industry, for example. The North American auto sector is a tightly integrated machine, with supply chains crisscrossing the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Canada is a major supplier of auto parts and finished vehicles, with $56 billion in automotive exports to the U.S. in 2024, according to Statistics Canada. Trump's 25% global tariffs on autos and parts, implemented in May 2025, are already wreaking havoc. A study by the Center for Automotive Research, CR, estimates that these tariffs could increase the price of a new car in the U.S. by up to $2,500, costing American consumers $45 billion annually. And guess what? Those higher costs aren't creating American jobs, they're killing them. CR predicts a loss of 200,000 U.S. auto jobs by 2026 if these tariffs persist. But wait, there's more. Canada's not just sitting there taking punches. They've retaliated with tariffs on U.S. consumer goods, everything from whiskey to washing machines. Canadian exports to the U.S. plunged 6.6% in March 2025, the biggest drop since the COVID-19 pandemic, while imports from the U.S. fell 2.9%, per Statistics Canada. Translation: both economies are bleeding, and the only winner here is political posturing. Folks, this isn't a trade war, it's a trade tantrum. And like any tantrum, it's the innocent bystanders, American and Canadian workers, consumers, and businesses, who get hurt the most. But hey, at least Trump gets to flex on Twitter, right? Now, let's talk about Trump's so-called justification for these tariffs, fentanyl. He claims these tariffs are necessary to stop the flow of fentanyl into the U.S. through Canada. Sounds serious, right? Except, plot twist, the data says otherwise. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration's 2024 National Drug Threat Assessment, the vast majority of fentanyl entering the U.S. comes from Mexico, not Canada. In 2024, 90% of fentanyl seizures at U.S. borders occurred at the U.S.-Mexico border, with only 0.02% traced to Canada. That's right, folks, Canada's role in the fentanyl trade is statistically negligible. So why is Trump hammering Canada with tariffs over this? Simple, it's a convenient excuse to look tough on drugs while pushing his real agenda, protectionism. This is a classic case of using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. If Trump were serious about tackling fentanyl, he'd be doubling down on border security with Mexico and cracking down on Chinese precursor chemicals, which fuel 80% of global fentanyl production, per the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Instead, he's picking a fight with Canada, a country that's doing more to secure its borders than ever before. In fact, Carney just announced a $1.2 billion plan to boost border security and Arctic defense in 2025, according to the Canadian Ministry of Public Safety. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good political stunt? Folks, this is what happens when you let a reality TV star run an economy. You get policies that are big on drama, low on logic, and disastrous for everyone involved. It's like trying to fix a leaky pipe with a flamethrower. Sure, it's flashy, but now your house is on fire. Now, let's get to the part of this story that's so absurd, it sounds like a rejected movie script: Trump's obsession with making Canada the 51st state. During his meeting with Carney, Trump once again floated this idea, calling it a wonderful marriage. Carney, to his credit, shut it down hard, saying, "It's not for sale, it won't be for sale, ever." But let's not kid ourselves, this isn't just Trump being Trump. This is a dangerous mix of economic imperialism and political bullying, and it's already backfiring. Trump's rhetoric has sparked a nationalist backlash in Canada, fueling Carney's election victory and driving boycotts of American goods. Cross-border tourism, a $20 billion industry in 2024, has tanked, with a 15% drop in U.S. visitors to Canada in the first quarter of 2025, per Destination Canada. Canadian consumers are ditching American brands, with sales of U.S.-made products like Coca-Cola and Ford vehicles dropping 8% and 12%, respectively, in the same period, according to Nielsen IQ and Autodata Corporation. Meanwhile, polls show that 78% of Canadians now view Trump's trade policies as a threat to their sovereignty, up from 62% in 2024, per the Angus Reid Institute. But here's the real economic fallout: this kind of rhetoric undermines trust, and trust is the lifeblood of trade. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, which Trump loves to tout as his signature achievement, is built on cooperation, not coercion. By treating Canada like a vassal state, Trump is jeopardizing a trade deal that supports 12 million American jobs and $1.3 trillion in annual trade, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And for what? A soundbite? A cheap laugh? This isn't leadership, it's lunacy. Folks, if you want to see what economic imperialism looks like, this is it. Trump's acting like Canada is some kind of distressed asset he can buy at a fire sale. But here's the thing: economies aren't reality TV shows. You can't just fire your trading partners and expect everyone to clap. This is how you turn allies into adversaries and prosperity into poverty. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This U.S.-Canada trade spat isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a broader pattern of government mismanagement that's pushing the global economy to the brink of recession. And folks, the data is screaming red flags. First, let's talk financial markets. Trump's flip-flopping on trade policy, announcing tariffs one day, softening them the next, then threatening more, has injected toxic levels of uncertainty into global markets. The CBOE Volatility Index, VIX, Wall Street's fear gauge, spiked to 35 in May 2025, its highest level since the 2020 pandemic crash, per Bloomberg. The S&P 500 has shed 8% of its value since Trump's tariff announcements in March 2025, wiping out $3 trillion in market value, according to Yahoo Finance. And don't even get me started on the Canadian dollar, which is bouncing around like a ping-pong ball, hitting 1.375 Canadian dollars against the US dollar before settling at 1.377 Canadian dollars on May 6, 2025. Second, let's talk growth, or the lack thereof. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, just slashed its 2025 global growth forecast to 2.8%, down from 3.2% in its October 2024 outlook, citing escalating trade tensions as a primary driver. In the U.S., GDP growth is projected to slow to 1.5% in 2025, down from 2.1% in 2024, per the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta's GDP Now tracker. Canada's not faring much better, with GDP growth expected to dip to 1.2% in 2025, down from 1.8% in 2024, according to the Bank of Canada. And folks, these aren't just numbers, these are jobs, businesses, and livelihoods on the line. Third, let's talk inflation. Trump's tariffs are a textbook recipe for stagflation: higher prices, lower growth. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that consumer prices rose 4.1% year-over-year in April 2025, up from 3.5% in January, with tariff goods like aluminum and autos leading the charge. Meanwhile, real wages, adjusted for inflation, fell 0.8% in the same period, per the Economic Policy Institute. Translation: Americans are paying more and earning less, all thanks to a trade war nobody asked for. Folks, this is what happens when you let politicians play economist. You get a toxic cocktail of uncertainty, inflation, and stagnation, served up with a side of political bravado. And the worst part? The government's not just failing to fix the problem, they're the ones causing it. This isn't leadership, it's economic arson. So, where does this leave us? In a word, screwed. Trump's tariff tantrum and Carney's counterpunch are just the latest chapters in a saga of government mismanagement that's driving both economies off a cliff. Workers are losing jobs, consumers are paying more, businesses are shutting down, and financial markets are in a tailspin, all because of policies that are big on ego and short on evidence. But here's the good news, folks, we don't have to sit back and take it. It's time to demand better. Demand trade policies based on data, not drama. Demand leaders who prioritize prosperity over posturing. And most of all, demand accountability for the clowns in charge who think economies are their personal playgrounds. Folks, this is Boss Economics World, where we don't just report the news, we call out the nonsense. If you're as fed up as I am with this economic clown show, hit that like button, smash that subscribe, and share this video with everyone you know. Because the only way we fix this mess is by shining a spotlight on it. Until next time, stay sharp, stay skeptical, and remember, the real bosses of economics are you, the people. See you in the next one.